Good morning. Uh, I've just done a whole video that didn't record properly. That noise, I'm sorry about that. That is Howard Marks down there doing an awful lot of chainsawing today. A little bit annoying. I suspect he's found some narcs in his supply chain, and he's dealing with them in the way that only a man ruthlessly at the top of the drugs game can do. So I'm sorry about that. So I might have to sort of slightly fight that. So hopefully, I did a long video take rehearsal, which didn't really record properly. So I'm hoping this kind of works okay. So I'm going to do my promised review of Stand on Zanzibar by John Brunner, which I promised last time. Now I realise it's been 2 weeks since I've done a video, for which apologies. That's partly because there's been a big book and I did get a bit stuck, and I'm going to explain why. Okay, I've got an idea about changing that, which I'm going to say at the end of the video. But to save people time, because people say, "Oh, I don't have time to watch your long videos, Gary." But every booktube video I see, I'm trying to, I'm aspiring to kind of to model myself on. They do long discursive reviews, so I guess that's where I want to sort of come from. Anyway, look, if you're never going to read this book, it's a science fiction classic from 1968. You can bail now, right? If you're intrigued by this book, kind of know of it in the sense of, yes, it's a classic in the field, never got round to it. I'm going to give you reasons to read it, not read it. You'll take it. But bottom line, this is a 3.8 out of 5. I understand why it's a classic. I understand why it's seen as good. I understand why it has influence on people I respect, like my occasional Canadian science fiction, uncompromising biologism, chum Peter Watts. I understand why he kind of sees Brunner as useful and interesting and inspirational. All that's been said, right? I'm going to give you lots of reasons not to read it, but before you go, I will say that there is a genre of one of my favourite podcasts is The Geek's Guide to the Galaxy. And they have a little thing, a book panel thing, which I think has got an unfortunate tendency to do a takedown of classics of science fiction from the past. I mean, they're horrible to poor old Arthur about Rendezvous with Rama. They didn't really like Moon is a Harsh Mistress. Okay. And I don't really see huge value in that. I mean, they were of their time, but they're part of the canon for a reason, and all this kind of stuff, right? And I'm going to give you lots of spoilers in this. So if you have already gone, sure, fine. If you are intrigued, I would say for the science fiction fan, this is reading with a lot of caveats, and I'm going to get through those. Okay, right. Stand on Zanzibar. Which is a metric of overpopulation. I believe that the idea was that that if you could fit all of the human population on certain demarked territories, and the Zanzibar was seen as a very scary peak to reach, because that would mean there were an awful lot of it. I think there's 7 billion people supposed to be on Earth in this one. It might be more. I think we're at 7 billion anyway. And as I kind of briefly discussed in a recent video, overpopulation turned out to be not really the problem. Underpopulation may well be a bigger issue. Anyway, okay, so good and bad, right? Let's do good. Some interesting ideas, some reasonable predictions. I know we do not judge science fiction books or product on how accurate they were about the future. That's not the idea. That's unrealistic. It's unfair to the writer. But some interesting ideas. AI, he saw as being very much part of the future, our future. He's absolutely right. Though AI is more distributed in our reality, in our timeline. In his timeline, it was concentrated in 1 or 2, 3, 4 big supercomputer, super AIs. The US one, which is in private hands, which is also reasonable prediction, wasn't it? Is called Shalmaneser, which I think is a Sumerian name. I might be wrong. As I say, I never look at Wikipedia before I do these videos, right? So that's that. And the Chinese are totally communist. not integrated into the world system, very much our enemy, the enemy. They're over there. They've got their own supercomputer, which is Confucius, Confutse. Uh, Apologies if I got the name right. Common Europe, not a bad prediction, John, has its own kind of set of computers, I believe they're described as. And kind of, we don't really hear a lot about Asia Pac. Japan's not a factor in this book at all. Australia, they don't really ever get mentioned at all. Africa is in the book, and there's also he has this kind of I think it's somewhere between like Indonesia, Malaysia. He calls it is it Yatakang? Sorry, one of the two, and that's a factor in this world as well. Okay, so broad sweep, big sweep. It's unusual, I think, to be outside of America. In a novel of this time. Formerly, he was trying. Okay, formerly that sounds patronising. I didn't mean, but he has four parallel kind of chapters. Yeah, so he has context, the happening world, tracking with close-ups, continuity. So he's got some metaphors here about how we structured the book in terms of that some things are kind of there's a main story thread, there's some context, etc., etc. I think that's quite good. That was quite well done. He's thought a lot about this. He's done a lot of research. He's done a lot of thinking about this. Um, Technologies like there's some advanced spying and weapons stuff because there's a bit of a James Bond thing, which I'll come to in a second. Genetics. I don't think gene editing, genetic engineering was genetic engineering may have been a term at the time, but that's certainly a factor here. So the context is this world. Has there is some space travel. There is a colony in the moon, a base on the moon, but that's it. There's nothing beyond that. There's no talk of kind of space stations or anything like that. We're very earthbound. So we have this complicated dystopian world. We have overpopulation is Brunner's theme, or kind of driving engine of this. Though in practical, as what that means is limits on lots of laws about how many children you can have, etc., etc. But more eugenics. Eugenics has come back, which I think again reasonable prediction, right? So that's going on, and there's strict baby limits, like I said, and it's got to the point now where the eugenics kind of systems are trying to weed out what seems like very trivial genetic problems, polychromatism, dichromatism, I think it is, right? Color blindness, which in this society is somehow seen as a very bad thing. Lots of other things being eradicated, and everyone's cool with that, but not color blindness. If you're colorblind, you can't have kids legally, right? Cases that. Okay, interesting. Yeah, sure. Didn't happen, but it's a not unreasonable thing to be interested in. And we have a kind of we have a spy story, we have a politics story, we have an economic story, which I think was quite interesting in terms of range for a novel, science fiction novel of the time, which had really been up till then quite about space travel, space colonization, etc. So that's interesting. He paints a big canvas. He's got ambition. He wants to tell a big story, and to some extent, he does. Okay, problems. This is endemic to any kind of speculative fiction. Some of his predictions just fall flat completely. There's worse sins committed by some than others. And his jargon, which it plunges you into. I think I said this last time, and it plunges you into it, and it's a bit grating. Sheeting as the F word. Whole is used a lot. But people, somewhere between 68 and 2010, which is when the book is set, we've stopped saying all the other words, John, and we just say these words that you made up. No. And there's a kind of other little things like imagine that space travel and orbit, even though there's no kind of space station, has become such a thing that's a dominant metaphor. Whale dreck is another thing that for some reason becomes a. Maybe he was just trying to get around censorship and he was trying to use a spicy language, but in ways, perhaps that was a feature of the time. Maybe his publisher made him do it. Okay, but reading it now, it's kind of like biggest problem. Biggest problem with this depiction of society is John. In 1968, mate, you were really gearing up for ERA. You were feminism, women's libbers were a huge part of the discussion. Maybe maybe from 68 on. Okay, I'll give you that. But you missed that completely. So his portrayal of future life is just no, right? We've got four main male characters. They have interiority and we understand their motivations and we get to be in their private discourse. There's two named women who are evil CEOs of companies who are very minor characters, kind of come in and out, and who meet bad ends, really. And the rest of the people there, he literally has this idea of, he calls them shiggies. So the idea is that girls are just, sexual property, and because of overpopulation, and under the Fuller Dome covering Manhattan, yeah, which is an interesting idea. You've got guys will share apartments, and there'll be a constant stream of these shiggies. Even saying the word, just clunky, horrible. Shiggies come in, and you share them between the flatmates, and it's all kind of, it's just women as property. I'm not saying this to kind of curry favour but yeah, no. And there's one girl character, an Indian girl character, who's there basically to be his James Bond bit of fluff on his mission, and she's there to give him a blowjob, and kind of he drops her, she's gone, and the poor girl's supposed to be suffering from leukemia, has come to this place to find a cure, and her story's just dropped. No, right? That's very unfortunate. And so he's playing dystopia. Another thing that I found two other things I found grating. One is that he imagines that in 2010, colonialism will still be such a huge factor in society that people will be in the West seething with resentment about the fact that they've lost their kind of privileged positions in colonial empires and they've gone back to retire and are very unhappy and are dying to get back to kind of, no, that never happened. Maybe more in France, maybe more in French culture. I think the French have got a slightly tighter grip or integration with their language sphere and their post-colonial. I think they've got a lot deeper economic ties than the British managed to do, wanted to do, could afford to do, tried to do and were rebuffed. I don't know. Yeah. So no, that's not a thing. And also, the post-colonial that doesn't work at all. Cutting to the chase, yes, that was the other irritating thing. I'm sorry, the Howard Marks is annoying me. He has this with his main characters. Yeah, I love a book with a dramatis personae, not as much as I love a book with a map, but we have the dramatis personae, and and we have all these minor characters who just all meet unfortunate ends, and one after the other. And it's kind of like, oh, are you making a point here about how terrible life is in the future and these people live these awful, unfulfilled, awful lives? Sure. But it's kind of narratively, I didn't buy it at all. It seemed like slightly depressing. Okay. So this is the biggest problem. You paint a depressing picture, John, but then you absolutely have your cake and eat it because you tell the ending is Tolkien-esque eucatastrophe because everything brilliant could possibly happen. So it turns out this society in Africa, this tribe in Africa, they've got a magic gene which enables them to live without conflict. And if we're going to get that gene and we're going to put it into everyone, and everything will be great because then we'll be able to live in complex societies and overcrowded societies without conflict, and there won't be anything bad, and it'll be good. On that one, he has an interesting idea. He has this mucker, and you think you must mean mugger or something, but what he actually means is, I think, like a mocker. So the idea is this pressure cooker society is so bad that occasionally people just go nuts, just go postal, and just kill everyone, become killing machines, and yeah, okay. So the muckers would go, everything would be cool. And then the other kind of great thing that comes in at the end is there's a plot point about this Indonesian Yatakang sort of place, which claims to have this conquered genetic engineering to the extent that they're going to be able to create breeds of supermen. And it turns out that's nonsense, but then actually it turns out there is a way to do it, and that comes in as well. So it's a happy ending. Fabulous. Great. Okay. A little bit. Yes, it's not Deus Ex Machina because those two things are all the way through. And I mean, maybe you could have guessed that there was something very special about the people of Beninia, and he kept kind of telling us that. But Okay, I'm not sure I really buy that, but fair enough. Okay. The central driving story is also interesting. It's basically a secret agent story. It's a James Bond thing where a sleeper agent for the American government is just called State. Is turned on, is activated to kind of go and investigate this genetic engineering in Indonesia. And they train him, they change him, they body alter him and mind alter him to be a killing machine. I've used that phrase again, a super spy, because you've got to complete the mission, right? So, and that really destroys him and changes him. But there's also lots of good action when that happens and all the rest of it, kind of thing. And it's like, okay, all right, cool, great, cool. That's a good story. That's well done, and he's a consequence of that are kind of mapped out. So that's all good. Putting it all together, some very good, curate's egg, I guess. Some very good parts, some good ideas, ambition. This is a writer who knows what he's doing. I think in 2024, some of it seems anachronistic, simplistic, and a bit crudely painted, perhaps. But all in all, I can understand why it's a classic. I understand why it won the Hugo, the Oscar of science fiction, and great. Okay, I will not keep it. I'll donate it. I'm sure there'll be somebody else who'd enjoy it, who maybe is that's I was going to say less fussy. Maybe if I'd read this as a teenager, it would have blown my mind. And maybe now I'm older and I see maybe I'm pickier, and I can. But great book, cool. Okay, sure. Now listen, I don't want to wait 2 weeks again between reviews. So I'm going to go for. I thought of a little. I'm going to try a technique. I'm going to try and read two books in parallel. The idea would be if a book is not working for me, I'll go to the other book and kind of flip between them. I'm going to do a non-fiction. I'm going to do fiction. The fiction is I've had this for ages as well. Daphne du Maurier, beautiful book actually, very very nicely well put together, and it's a collection of her macabre horror short stories. The first story is Don't Look Now. The second story is The Birds, as in, okay. So I'm intrigued by that. Be interested. I've started Rebecca 5, 6, 7 times, never got through it. Love the first film. So intrigued, interested, want to see what happens with that. The other one is 100 Year Life, which is quite trendy a few years ago, which is all about how Gen Z, Gen Alpha are going to have these long lives. Maybe I'll have a long life. And it's kind of how do we prepare for it? How do you fund it? How do you keep yourself healthy? All this kind of good stuff, right? So that's going to be the two books I'm going to try this week, and let's see how I get on. I'm going to do another how I'm doing with the blood sugar diet video before I go back to my trip to England next week, and that's progressing. I know that some people are interested in that, so I can only finish by thanking you if you made it all the way through. I'll thank you anyway if you bailed early. Booktube seems to be long, discursive videos, guys. That's the model I'm going for, right? To be clear, right? That's what I'm going for. Not book talk, booktube. Anyway, all I can say is carry on with your own TBRP. Good luck with that. Like and subscribe if you want to. Comment, disagree with me. Tell me what I got wrong about Stand on Zanzibar. And I'll see you soon. Okay. Cheers. Bye bye. Bye bye.